listeners. Welcome to episode 253 and our final episode of 2023. I am your host, Amy Herman. This podcast is dedicated to the issues and challenges school librarians face every day. As a school librarian in my 17th year, I knew I wanted a podcast which addressed the nuts and bolts of running a successful library program. I don't claim to have the answers, but I hope that this is a platform to share resources and exchange ideas. Now is a perfect time to mention that all the ideas and opinions expressed in this podcast by myself, my interview guests, and listeners who reach out to the podcast are our own and do not reflect those of our school districts. When incorporating research, I always make sure to cite my sources. So whether you are a novice or a veteran school librarian, this podcast has something for you. I'd like to extend a very heartfelt congratulations to Stephanie in Washington, who recently became a National Board Certified Teacher. Your hard work and persistence paid off. Friends, if you are interested in pursuing this accolade, tune in to episode 189, National Board Certified Librarian, and my conversation with Melissa Gergen and Stephanie Wilson. I'd like to extend a very special welcome this week to listeners Megan in Georgia and Jenna in Vermont. I asked Jenna if I could share her letter, and Jenna said, "Hi, Amy. My name is Jenna, and I am a second-year 6 through 12 librarian in Southern Vermont. I wanted to reach out for so long now, but did not know how to put my gratitude into words. I started listening to your podcast back when I was teaching high school French during COVID and was considering a switch. I was immediately drawn in and inspired by your podcast and all the amazing ways we can take our job in unique directions. I knew I wanted to become a school librarian because I could reach kids in so many more meaningful ways than I thought I was in the classroom. I give your podcast lots of credit for giving me the confidence to jump into this new role. Now I'm halfway-ish through my second year, and I'm happy to say that I love this job so much. I always tell my students that it is the best job ever and hopefully inspire a new generation. Anyway, I just wanted to reach out and say thank you for all you do and share. This podcast is invaluable and really helps advocate for our profession." Friends, you have to imagine it is incredibly validating to hear from listeners who are tuning in and enjoying the conversations, and they're able to utilize the resources, the strategies, the suggestions that are coming from our experts who make these wonderful, generous appearances on the show week in and week out. I love learning about those who are tuning in because it allows us to find ways to better reach and speak to the needs of those who are tuning in. So thank you so much. Anytime that people take a few minutes out of their day to let me know that this is something that they value, it really does make what I do all the more meaningful. I welcome you and all listeners to reach out with your feedback and episode suggestions. You can reach me either on Facebook, on X, formerly known as Twitter. My handle is at LMS_United. On Threads, you can find me at School Librarians United, and on Blue Sky at SLU Podcast, or the email address schoollibrariansunited@gmail.com. If you include your mailing address, I'll be sure to send you a podcast sticker. Friends, be sure to listen to episode 224. I announce a sponsorship with Literati Book Fairs. And now is a chance to hear from one of Literati's team members, Carissa. Carissa, welcome back to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Would you remind listeners, Carissa, what do you do at Literati?
So I'm the creative director here at Literati. I oversee the brand vision and creative direction for all of our branded content and customer-facing marketing materials.
I am so grateful there's somebody like you at Literati because this is absolutely not my area of expertise. But when it comes to advertising a book fair that's coming up, I know I used to get very worked up. I am no marketing expert. And what I don't want to do is waste my time advertising for something if I don't have to. Can you give the listeners an idea of what does Literati do for the librarians who sign up for a book fair? What kind of marketing materials come in anticipation of a book fair? And what would a librarian expect if they were going to be hosting a book fair with Literati?
Sure. Yeah. So we try to provide everything that the librarian could ever need to promote their fair. So we provide a whole suite of marketing assets from all of the promotional printed assets that get sent directly to every school that comes in a box, and it includes several posters, featured book flyers, bookmarks, outdoor signage, and even things like letters and flyers to send home to the parents to let them know about the upcoming fair. And then we also include a whole host of digital download materials like really fun promotional videos that we have book trailers for every book and also longer videos for the different age ranges. We have several social media assets that librarians can download if their schools are on social. We have email templates and all sorts of newsletter graphics that librarians can download to help include it in their existing school newsletters. Also things that they can put on their school's website. We even have things like classroom activity sheets that tie into the fair that we can pass out to teachers, or you can pass them out in the library. So it really helps kids to get amped up about the upcoming fair. And then we actually also have an online interface that we call Open Book, and that gives librarians full access to all sorts of really helpful articles and how-to videos on how to run as successful as fairs as possible. We kind of try to cover everything, and we're always looking into all of our surveys and customer feedback to learn what is it that librarians are really looking for, and we try to create those assets as much as possible.
Oh, fantastic. Well, and don't be surprised if one of my listeners reaches out with an advice, because librarians are generally people who really want to, we found that if we say something, we generally get a good response. So don't be surprised if a listener sends a request through me. So Carissa, thank you so much, because I'll tell you what, I would worry a lot less if I knew that box was coming. And it means that I don't have to do all that work. Thank you so much for joining the podcast today.
Thank you, Amy.
Friends, be sure to tune in to learn all about Literati and their very generous offer, Librarians Who Book their very first Literati Book Fair for this year, and mention the code UNITED. When booking may qualify to receive a $500 gift card to Titlewave. Visit the link in today's show notes and call the Literati team to see if you qualify. And now a word from our sponsor, Capstone. Capstone is an innovative publisher and education technology provider of children's content for school libraries, classrooms, and at-home learning. Home of the award-winning PebbleGo research database, Capstone has a passion for creating inspired learning and intellectual curiosity in children, and I am so excited to be working with them. I'm grateful to Capstone for their continued commitment to support the podcast in Season 6. They are offering listeners of School Librarians United a very special discount. Visit shop.capstonepub.com and use the code UNITED to get $20 off an order of $100 or more for both print and Capstone interactive ebooks. That's code UNITED for $20 off an order of $100 or more for both print and ebooks on shop.capstonepub.com. And now for our episode, Quiet Advocacy, and my conversation with Ashley Cooksey. Friends, I'm so excited. Ashley Cooksey, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me, Amy. I'm so excited to be here.
I know that we cross paths a lot digitally, our virtual PLN, and I know that we've been in conferences at the same time, and again, crossed and didn't ever have a chance to really chit-chat. And so this is my selfish opportunity to have you all to myself, and we can talk. So, thank you very much. You're going to be our very last episode of 2023. This is our opportunity to really sort of dig into this idea of quiet advocacy. And I'm hoping you're going to help us. So thank you so much. I know it's a really busy time of the year, so I'm grateful you're here with us today.
Oh, absolutely. It's not a problem. Today was actually the last day of finals. So it is my quiet time of, I say quiet, in quotation marks there. It is my slowed down time of year. So I am glad we got to squeeze this in. It's been several years of talking back and forth and planning and working on it. And I'm really excited to be here and talk about what quiet advocacy is.
Well, and I think that people are going to realize that we do a lot of this without even realizing it. Can I ask, do you still have papers to grade? Have you turned in your grades for the semester? Are you good?
I have turned in all of my grades for the semester. I did that Monday afternoon, and I actually received my final grade in my PhD class for the semester. So I'm done with that. I can quit worrying for the next 3 weeks.
Outstanding. All right. Well, we're just kicking off your little winter break here. I want to ask you before we start today's topic, would you give us a little idea about your journey as a school librarian? Because I know that there are listeners out there who are considering a similar journey or they've started to embark on one of their own. Would you give us an idea of when you made that sort of transition, professionally?
Sure. And my transition to the school library is full of ups and downs and bumps and bruises. I actually started teaching as a third grade teacher in a very small rural district here in Arkansas. And that district, after 2 years of me being there, had to implement a reduction in force policy, which means the last person hired or the least experienced loses their position. And guess who that was? That was me. So after 2 years of being a third grade literacy teacher, which I love, third grade is one of my favorite elementary grades, I have to say. I was unemployed and applied all over. And the feedback that I would receive is, you're not experienced enough to be considered an experienced teacher, but you're not a brand new baby teacher, so we can't hire you at the bottom level of our salary schedule. So I ended up being a substitute teacher and woke up one morning and thought, I think I'm going to go back to school and get my master's. Showed up on campus, my alma mater, which I actually am an assistant professor there now, Arkansas Tech University, and walked into Dr. David Bell's office and said, hey, I want to be a school librarian. And he said, great, classes start today. So I spent the afternoon running back and forth all over campus, which was when things were still in paper. Applied to graduate school. They stamped my paper. I ran back across campus, was approved and put into classes for that semester that actually started in person that evening. It was interesting because I actually interviewed with Dr. Bell for my job now, and I said, you got me in trouble coming into the library program, because he was the department chair and approved, but did not ask permission of the program director, Miss Connie Zimmer. So when I showed up for class that night, she said, someone is in this class without my permission. I don't know who it is, but I know I have someone new on my roster. Yeah, it was, and I raised my hand. I was like, that would be me. Dr. Bell put me in here. And she said, well, he's my boss, so I guess he has the final say. Which she was a lovely person and, was just giving me a hard time. We ended up, was one of my very favorite mentors, passed away a couple of years ago. So our community here lost an amazing school librarian. But that was my journey into becoming a school librarian. My first job was in a middle school library, very small, of course, in Arkansas, rural area. And that was a journey. The school had not had a librarian in many, many years. And the library was, in quotes again, being remodeled, which meant that they spray painted the shelves for me, put in new carpet, and I came into a pile of books on the stage of the cafeteria. Nothing was cataloged. The room had been basically storage, so no one knew what books were actually there, what books students had taken. So I started that library pretty much from scratch, only to pack it up the next spring and move it to a different campus. So when I say I was baptized by fire, I really, it was an experience.
Well, and it sounds like you've taken this love and this passion for being a school librarian to the next level. You're an assistant professor at your alma mater. Give us an idea, where are you in your PhD, and could you tell us about the classes you teach?
Sure. I am about halfway through my PhD program, which is exciting and scary and hard all at the same time. So I should be finished, fingers crossed, in the spring of 2025. And the classes that I teach at ATU are in the school library program. In Arkansas, you have to have a teacher's license in addition to a master's to have the school library certification added. We do have an ancillary license, but we haven't had a lot of people come through the program that way. I feel like administrators see that you don't have a teaching experience, and they can't move you anywhere else. That license is only allows you to be in a school library. So our program is it's called Instructional Technology / School Library Media. So it's a K-12 licensure here in Arkansas. It is fully online, so anyone, anywhere can actually enroll. And just a secret, we actually offer application fee waivers. If you are a current educator, a first-gen college student, a first responder, police officer, you can apply to our program for free. We have an email that you write into, and they'll give you a code to apply for free. So it's pretty sweet deal, and we have a flat rate tuition. So if you're out of Arkansas, you're not going to pay any additional cost to attend from another state.
And that's huge. I love when, because I'm going to tell you right now, there are people who are tuning in right now who have not yet made the move to get that degree, whether it's online or it's a certificate program or a master's in library science. You're working at your alma mater. You and I, it sounds like, because my program was entirely in person, and it was a very different degree, I sense, from people who have since gotten the same degree at the same institution, albeit remotely. And it blows my mind because I went to school intentionally to be in person and learn surrounded by other school librarians. And I loved that, but I recognize also the need to be able to offer these programs. But it sounds like you're doing so much at ATU to entice people from outside of the state. Are these programs by and large asynchronous when you're offering these programs?
So my program, the school library program, is fully online. It is mainly asynchronous. I try to have 2 to 3 synchronous classes on. We use WebEx or Microsoft School a couple of times a semester, just because I think that connection, the face-to-face camaraderie, getting to know your peers is really important. Like you, my program was face-to-face. So I traveled to campus. I spent 3 hours, in class with people. So when we all started out in the school library, we had connections with each other, which is super important because I wasn't only fish in a pond. I couldn't run across the hall and ask someone else, how did you handle this situation? Or what did you do for this lesson plan when it falls apart? School librarians, we're the only one in that building most of the time. So I think having that face-to-face connection is important. Now, for me, I do record sessions because I know sometimes things happen. We're adults. Many have kids. You're in a full-time job. I had one student this semester that emailed me. She was very upset because she couldn't come to class because of parent-teacher conferences. That's more important, right? That's part of your job. So I totally understand adult things. And if you have that happen, I don't consider it that big of a deal. I would love for you to come to class, but, take care of your life, your job. If you're sick, I had someone, very upset about being sick, and she apologized that she couldn't be in class. I'm like, you're running a fever. It's okay.
I love it. And friends, we're going to make sure to put links in the show notes because, again, if you're considering a program and you're going to be online, one that it sounds like you can really sort of start to make some decisions, especially when you talk about money. And not everybody is as, accommodating when it comes to out-of-state tuition, out-of-country tuition, and so I think that's very exciting to hear about. Before we can talk about quiet advocacy, I think we need to establish what isn't quiet advocacy. I am going to be completely transparent with you and everybody who's tuning in right now. Unlike some of the truly inspirational school librarians I have been so fortunate to interview on this podcast, never have I ever spoken at a board meeting or a congressional hearing. I have attended rallies, but I've never attended a protest. I have never had to defend the removal of titles from my collection that I oversee. And the only challenge process I've ever participated in was regarding classroom content, P.S. Maniac McGee being read aloud in the 5th grade, scandalous, and not, books that were actually in the library. Can I ask, do you feel that you have ever engaged in what we would consider, loud advocacy?
Yes. My former school district, before there was an actual school board meeting room, they would come to each campus throughout the school year. So there was enough that they visited each campus once. And my campus, because of our amazing cafeteria ladies, and let me tell you, if you're not friends with the cafeteria ladies, that needs to be on your list. Cafeteria ladies, janitors, and the administrative assistant. But our campus was the Thanksgiving campus. So it was in November. And they met in my library. So I made sure that I was at that board meeting. Each board member had something at their table when they came in. So our state organization had coffee mugs. So each board member got a coffee mug. It may have been my lesson plan that I was doing. So I tried to put that at their table just to show them something. And actually happened quite accidentally. It was the first time that I had done physical breakout boxes in the library. And my principal happened to walk through. And this was funny because she had a hard time when I put in my purchase order for like 18 black toolboxes and hasps and different kinds of locks. She was like, "What are you doing?" But she walked through as students were literally running all over the library. They were on computers looking at the card catalog, looking for books because there was a clue in a book. And she said, "What are you doing?" And I explained it to her. She said, "Okay, the board meetings tonight, have these ready to go for the board members." So I stayed after school and got them ready for the board members. And the board members went through the breakout boxes like a student would. And they were, blown away that this was something that we did in the library with elementary students, mind you.
I love that. I really do. And our spaces are the show. We can showcase so much. And it is oftentimes that default space, whenever there's a meeting of any sort of size, it's guaranteed going to happen in our space. And I know that it's always an opportunity for us to just sort of signal to the people who are walking into our space. I know our Learning Commons is the judges room for our solo and ensemble. And it's wonderful because you get all these music teachers who are judging the students who are doing their solo and ensemble. And it's usually a very sort of nice place for them to hang out. And they do have they do all their calculations and they give out their awards and things like that. And it was always nice to hear from my band teacher and my symphonic teacher to say, "Listen, they love this space. They think it was amazing." It was like, having this as our sort of, it is everybody's room, and we get to really showcase what we do. And when you mentioned the lunch ladies, every week, our lunch lady sends me the menu for the week, and then I'm in charge of the monitors, all the messaging that is scrolling on the hallway, marquee. It's just a monitor, and we just have a Google slide that's, been published to the web, and it just, 5 seconds a slide or something like that. But everything goes through me, which means, and this is a little bit about advocacy, right? Because all of a sudden, if you need something done, you have to go talk to the librarian, which you're like, even if you're the lunch lady and you want to put that menu up on the monitor, well, then you're going to have to know who the librarian is. And, every club advisor, every coach knows who the librarian is, because everybody in student services knows who I am. Because if you want to get your messaging up on the monitors, there is only one person who can do that. And it happens to be me. And I'm the gatekeeper of some of this stuff. And that's not a bad thing.
It is absolutely not a bad thing. And just thinking about other advocacy avenues that I've had that was loud advocacy, I actually did speak this spring during a legislative session against a bill. It was the first time I had ever emailed and engaged with legislators. Went to the Capitol more times than I could count because I was in a different role. I actually had to take vacation hours and ended up using about a week worth of vacation hours, about 40 hours, driving back and forth to our state capitol and sitting and waiting on a meeting that only took 2 to 3 minutes. But it was nerve-wracking. I was not as prepared as I would like to be. I hear, like Amanda Jones, oh my gosh, as many times as she sat in congressional hearings and legislative sessions and spoke. Nancy Jo Lambert in Texas as well. There are so many rock star librarians who have done this many, many times before. And Schoolhouse Rock did not prepare me for how a bill becomes a law. I was not at all prepared, but I made great contacts with legislators who sat down and spoke with me about school librarianship and about what actually happens in a library and the fact that we are not putting obscene materials in the hands of minor students. My school library would not have I didn't have Twilight. It wasn't appropriate for K-6. But some of these accusations were just outstanding, and being able to have conversations, even if the bill ended up getting passed in a revised version. It was nice to make those contacts loudly, because now I'm able to. I have a couple of legislators' phone numbers. I can text them and ask questions now, which is beneficial to me as a librarian, a teacher, and just as a citizen. Knowing that they're open to contact was actually eye-opening for me.
Friends, there's a playlist which you can listen to, and there's more than 20 episodes that we've done over the past 6 years that have to do with advocating in a myriad of different ways and interviewing some just rock star librarians who have done some phenomenal things to bring to the attention of their board of education or to their, state congressional gatherings when they speak on behalf of what we do professionally. This kind of loud advocacy, we have many examples of leaders like this in our profession. I've been very fortunate to interview Martha Hickson in New Jersey. I know Casey Boyd had students doing a read-in on the steps of her state legislature, I think, in D.C. Well, it would have been D.C. So, she was, doing very public things to raise awareness for the plight of school librarians and the job that we have, making sure that our students have free and unfettered access to the books on the shelves. And so I've been very lucky to interview many of these people. You mentioned Amanda Jones. And again, these are individuals for whom it has taken years off their life when you consider how much it has taxed them emotionally, the impact on their health. And I know that there have been examples. I know Martha Hickson mentioned just how worn down she became being assaulted by the insults that were being, hurled against her and the space that she had created. I want to make sure that we bring some attention to the kinds of things that we do on a daily basis to make sure that we are doing everything we can to protect the role that we have in our spaces and make sure that there's always going to be a school librarian in the spaces where we teach. Advocating for my job was something I never had to do when I was a classroom teacher. In fact, I never learned that advocacy in the workplace was something I had to do until I was taking library classes at Wayne State University. This would have been 2 decades ago. But as an assistant professor who regularly interacts with the next generation of school librarians, can I ask, what is your message when it comes to advocacy?
So actually that was a class that I taught this semester. was included quite a bit of advocacy, and it was in small pieces, or what I would call quiet advocacy. And one of those things included evaluating your school library. I introduced the AASL School Library Evaluation Checklist. We talked about it, and they sort of did like a self-evaluation of how they thought the library would score in each of the 6 shared foundations. And one thing we talked about was how in Arkansas, school librarians are evaluated using the test system. But we do have our own rubric. It was recently revised, just a few little minor changes. But sometimes that rubric can be overwhelming, especially to an administrator or someone who has an opinion of the library that was what they experienced as they were in school. And as we know, libraries have changed quite a bit. It's not so quiet anymore. It may not just be reading a book or checking out a book. There could be kids running all over looking for clues and breakout boxes, right? So that AASL checklist is short, it's sweet, it's easy to read. Hand it to your administrator. Quietly, it's not something that takes a lot of time. Just say, hey, this is a tool that AASL uses. In Arkansas, our curriculum standards are the AASL standards, so it matches, it aligns nicely. It's really, you can just kind of check a few things. If you have any questions, talk to me. So that's one thing that we did. And another thing was looking at how you share information. I did like a quarterly newsletter that I sent out to our classroom teachers, the administrators, the school board members, superintendent, that just had like circulation statistics. Here's how many books I purchased. These are activities we've done. Kind of snippets from my Google Calendar, because I always put in when I had a meeting with a teacher. Even if we didn't meet face to face, I still kind of tagged it on my calendar and just put some notes in. And that gave me data, right? So just these little newsletters made a big impact. Teachers would come to me and say, hey, I see that you have all of these things going on with 3rd grade. But in 2nd grade, we really haven't partnered together. Here's what we have going on. And that was always a really nice way to do things. And I didn't have to really say much to anybody. I just sent the email out. And pro tip, if you use Bitly or a link shortener, you can get data that shows how many people actually clicked on it and read that newsletter. So those are just a few things that we did in class this semester. The students actually had a choice to create a graphic that was, a school library newsletter like that. Jennifer Lagarde has a great blog post on that with a bunch of different templates to use. James Allen has an amazing blog post, and I think he even has like this really cool template that you just plug in the numbers and it auto-populates. So he uses Looker Studio. Super cool. He just did a webinar about that not too long ago that I popped into and attended. So students could do that kind of newsletter, or they could choose to do a library menu of services. And I had several teachers in my classes. I have pretty much everyone that's enrolled in my program are currently classroom teachers. I have a few that are already in the school library, but some of them chose to do that menu of services. And I said, I actually went to the librarian and sat down and said, hey, what do you offer? Here's some examples. If you Google school library menu of services, you get tons of ideas. And created one for their librarian. Another student is a brand new librarian. This is her first year in the library. And she said, I made it as a wish list. My menu of services is what I want to offer. It's like my goals. Quietly. You didn't really have to do anything.
Well, and I do agree. I think that when you create these infographics, I think when you create these menu of services, I think on some level they are aspirational, and they are wish lists. You are saying these things out loud, and I think when you publish them and put them out into the world, I think you are hoping that it lands with an audience.
Oh, it's like a vision board, right?
Yes, absolutely. And it is important because when you say things, they start to become real. And when you connect those things with an audience that is even a little receptive, I think that, and I call it celebrating those small wins. and that's advocacy at work, because we are actively soliciting the participation of our staff with us. I think of those of us on flexible schedules. The ones who are on fixed schedules, I want to, having done that for 14 years, I was on a fixed schedule. And I remember that there was times that you sort of felt so sort of put upon because there wasn't any sort of like give. You were the students arrived, you were glorified babysitting and sort of realizing, how I don't need to advocate. They come to me so the teachers can have their release time. And yet, when the teachers realize the value of what we're doing when we have those students, this is about providing a very important part of the student's education. It is not just release time for the teachers.
Right. And so many times as an elementary librarian, I was prep period, like you said. I did have free flow, so students came certain hours of the day, but I never got, or rarely ever, I should say, got the opportunity to attend grade level meetings or PLC meetings. To be able to talk to those teachers other than in the hallway or if I knew them personally. But I did ask to be added to their shared Google folders so that I could see the notes from the meetings. And I started kind of selecting and making comments. Hey, I have this book collection. Let me pull those for you. Oh, I see that you're studying Mac Barnett. Let me do a display of his books in the library. Just those kinds of things. And it didn't take long for the teachers to start commenting to me and tagging me. Hey, we're about to start the rock cycle. Do you have books that you can pull? I need some resources for XYZ. So that was our way of collaborating. I didn't get to meet face to face, but I still got that time in.
I had a teacher who I greatly admire who created a class. And in creating the class, I got to have all these great conversations. I was sort of a sounding board. It's sports and literature. And sports and literature, and it was an ELA credit so that it would satisfy a semester credit for high school English language learning. And it was fun because I also had a grant and I had money. And I said, would you like some books in the library? I like, how do you see, you call this sports and lit. What kinds of books would you like in the library for your students to have to choose from when they are reading books about sports in our collection? And so as I'm putting together my purchase order, my teacher who is formulating this class, which launched for the very first time this September, along with all these brand new books coming into the collection, I made sure that in my mind, I spent a certain amount of money to support this brand new class. So right off the bat, rather than having to worry about building up momentum and a collection, and we already had one going. And I did it with him in mind. He gave me titles and I'd buy multiple copies so his students could read it. And I mean, that kind of collaboration, you're not going to get that kind of support from necessarily a colleague. I mean, but when you talk to a librarian, we can make things happen, teaching those research lessons about, things that happen in sports, but using your Gale databases and working on those annotated bibliographies and teaching you how to get that MLA citation just right into your, all of those things we can do if they just let us.
Right. Yeah. And that's where those little tiny advocacy pieces come in. Your library menu of services. Are you starting a new unit? Let's chat about books I can add. So even those little things add up to make a big difference.
Something else that I'm aware of, and I don't know if Arkansas has something like this. I know when I think about Florida Power School, Florida has a power school. I know Georgia. I hear librarians talk about their state organization recognizes outstanding library programs and school library programs, and creating sort of a rubric of evidence that you can assemble to establish a rating through your state organization. And I know in Michigan, the Library of Michigan has something called School Libraries in the 21st Century. And it is very much, and it's a self-evaluation, and then you provide that evidence, and you get evaluated based on what kinds of evidence you can provide to meet those different ratings and the criteria. And when you do that, it is aspirational in such that you are evaluating what you have with a knowledge of what you can do better, and making those sort of adjustments to the program moving forward. Those kinds of things really do remind our building administration and our district administration of the effort that the librarian is putting forth to raise the performance of this space and what we can do to support our schools. So wherever you happen to be, look into your state organization with the awareness that there are sometimes those self-evaluation programs where you can sort of apply and see about getting a state rating. And also something that we've talked about, I know with the Texas librarians, you have, and I'm trying to remember if this is done through the state, but you have the Tall Texans and you have the All-Stars. And creating these sort of cohorts. I'm very excited because we're going to be in 2024, we're going to have an interview with some librarians who were together in a cohort to support each other in how they are going to better themselves as all-stars and tall Texans. And we've interviewed a couple in our program. But I wonder, taking a look at other ways in which we can, this quiet advocacy. Let's definitely talk about social media for a minute, because this is something that, I don't know the extent to which classroom teachers feel it is vitally important to put things out on social media. I think people are getting better. But can I ask you, when you are talking to your students about, you were AASL's social media superstar for 2018. Congratulations. Can you give us an idea, what were some of the things, and I appreciate that was a couple of years ago, what were some of the things that you feel caught the attention of the award committee that particular year?
I think that for that particular year, that was right after we had actually moved to the computer lab. So my library was an old cafeteria. The library portion was in where you would sit down. And then the portion that was kind of the serving area or the back kind of kitchen area was bookshelves. And when I first got to the library, floor to ceiling bookshelves of VHS tapes. I'm not kidding. VHS tapes. There were some DVDs, but not a lot. Spelling bee binders dating back to the 80s. So I did a lot of cleaning, and it took me several years. The first time I weeded the collection, I remember teachers being so upset that I was, quote, throwing away books. So that was an advocacy piece. Let me explain how I weed books and how I decide they don't belong in the library. And that it actually went over very well. They understood. Students did get to take them home. If they were fiction books and still appropriate, I tended to try to get the nonfiction out. Just because if it's outdated for the library, I don't want the outdated information in hands of students. But that did give me a partnership for some classroom teachers with weeded books. The art teacher used the books that kind of had canvas covers on them, and would cut them off and gesso over them and use them so she didn't have to purchase canvas.
Oh my gosh, that's so clever. No, I know exactly what you're talking about. Because I had books that were that old, they had canvas covers.
Yeah.
Oh.
So she did that. I had a 5th grade teacher that came in and got chapter books loaded up a box. And I was like, what are you doing with all of these? Because I knew she wasn't putting them in her classroom. And she said, well, I'm teaching functional print and we're learning how to follow directions. The students had Googled and had looked on Pinterest book art. So the folded page book art. And she was getting books for them to use to create their art. And then they displayed it in the library, which none of this has anything to do with the social media superstar. But I shared all of that on social media. Things that were going on in the library, our updates, how we actually co-taught the classes. So I was elementary, so during scheduled time in the library, the class was actually split in half, and half went to the computer lab because it was in the library now, and half stayed in the library. So it was very small classes, 10 to 15 students. We were able to get a little bit more done. And then we were able to start doing stations and started rotation stations, and some of it was computer lab and some of it was library. We had creation stations and Lego stations, coding, computer science. So that I was just sharing on my social media pages with permission from administrators. They knew that I was sharing this. I tried to make sure that I followed all of our guidelines for the district. Focus on activities and non-student faces. So what are they doing? What does it look like? What's the product? And that's just kind of where it went. It was just sharing what we were doing and how a library can go from being so static, quiet, come in, get your book, sit down, to loud and active, within just the span of a couple of years, with collaborations happening all the time. You mentioned working with the teacher for this sports and literacy class. I worked a lot with our school counselor because she didn't have a classroom. So she had class in the library a lot. And I remember one day when she came in and had a sixth grade tutoring class. So sixth graders who were advanced and were done with all of their work could go into lower grade levels and read or help them with math. And she met in the library. One day when she was meeting, she ran long and first grade came in. They came in, checked their books in, went and sat down. We were 3/4 of the way through class before she realized we were in there and we were sharing a space. And she said, oh my gosh, you could have kicked me out. I'm like, why? There's plenty of space. Let's use the space together. So I think that just sharing what we were doing on my social media pages, as well as the schools. So I didn't manage my school's pages. I don't know if you do, but I made sure at least once a week something went to Coach Keller, who was our PE teacher. She managed our Facebook pages. So something from the library went to her at least once a week, to make sure that she shared it. And then whoever managed our district page would, of course, share from everyone else's pages. So it was just getting kind of those connections and knowing who to send what to. And I think I mentioned before we started recording, I was able to be our news reporter, in quotes. We had a radio station in town, and my principal said, hey, you're going to go record for us. And it was once a month. So I sat down once a month with our local radio station and recorded snippets. It may not have been about the library, but I was able to plug book fair here and there, and talk about how the school, sometimes I would have specific topics, but anytime I could sneak in something about the library, you bet it was going in. And our local newspaper, I had her email address. So anytime something was happening, she said, I would rather print active stories and pictures from you in the field than set up a time that I have to come in and take pictures. So anytime something was happening around the school, I emailed it to her. So when I had something in the library going on, it was really easy for me to email Lacey and say, hey, this is happening in the library. Here's some pictures to go with it. And it may not have been a full story. There was a picture or two.
Well, and I know that every time I've interviewed somebody who, as it was part of their job, was to run the, daily student-read news. And the student read news, was going to be a video program. It was 15 minutes at the beginning of the day or at the end of the day, and you better believe that not only did it take place in the library, but something about the library was going to make its way into, the news feed that day. Whether it was a contest or winners of something or celebrating an achievement or talking about the great things that were happening in the library at lunchtime. I mean, it was always an opportunity to showcase what we do and do it. I know, like I said, I do the marquee. I do all the monitors. Oh, you better believe the library messaging gets out there loud and clear. This is very self-serving.
Yes. Yeah. And even like creating a graphic, if we had, book fair or something happening and emailing it out to teachers and saying, hey, when you send that newsletter home on Friday, can you put this in there? It was already done for them. So all they had to do was copy paste, right? Just any little snippet I could get, I took.
Oh, absolutely. Can I just ask another thing where I think that we really do ourselves a great service is when we sit on committees and represent, and I'm thinking at the building level, I'm thinking at the district level. I got to say, as an educator, I wasn't really riled up about being on a committee because it just seemed like one more thing to do. But this week, I got picked to be on our DEI committee, and I'm so excited because, and again, as a classroom teacher, this wouldn't have really been on my radar, but as the librarian, I feel like not only is this an opportunity to speak from a position where I feel I have my finger on the pulse of a lot of things that are going on in the building, but it's also an opportunity for people to become more aware of all the things that are already happening in our space in that context. And, I'm shameless about it. In the episode, #Good Trouble with Casey Boyd and talking about John Lewis, but also this idea that if you don't have a seat at the table, thank you, Shirley Chisholm, to bring a folding chair. If you don't have a seat at the table, find a way to get there and have your voice heard.
Yeah, and I have presented a session. I have a session that is leadership with a lowercase L, because you don't have to have that title. So some of that serving on committee work is leadership with a lowercase L. I'm not an administrator, but you can bet I'm looking for those opportunities where I can be at the table or near the table. I grew up in a restaurant. Waitresses can eavesdrop like nobody's business.
Oh, and you're absolutely right. And this is one of the reasons why we have coffee and cream in the library workroom, because when the teachers come in, all of a sudden, again, I've got my finger on the pulse of what's going on in the building. Number one, I've got a walkie and it's on and I'm listening. And number two, when people are walking in and out, you see what's going on, whether it's the copies they're making or the laminating I'm doing, or, you just are tuned in because on some level, you have a way to help people do their jobs. And the more we know about what they're doing, the more likely we are to be seen as valued partners in learning.
You mentioned earlier about being the person that someone, knew that they could go to. And I always felt like my circulation desk was sort of like a bar. People would come in and kind of lean the elbow up. But I also had the illegal extension cords. So when someone needed an extension cord, guess who they came to? And the toolbox. I had a hammer and screwdrivers. So when someone needed that, they had to come to me. And I got to know, what was happening in the school or, anything like that. Even with the custodians, they knew that I had kind of those things tucked away.
Oh, absolutely. I have a veritable medicine cabinet in my Learning Commons workroom, but I've also taken it upon myself to carry, including Tums, throat lozenges, hair ties, and acetaminophen. I've got ibuprofen. I've got caffeine.
I had a salt shaker because students could have lunch in the library. It took a lot of stress off of my 5th and 6th grade students. They were at the age where playground may not have been their favorite place to be. And they were also in a lot of sports or gymnastics or dance and knew they were not getting home until 8:30 or 9 o'clock. So they came in at lunch. They can bring their lunch or bring their tray from the cafeteria and do homework or sit quietly and read. And they were amazed that I had the salt shaker because I remember it very clearly. It was a breakfast for lunch day, and they had those scrambled eggs. So a salt shaker made me the popular place to be.
I think a lot of us have the table of the help yourself or the little drawers. I know during the pandemic, we were a place where all the masks were distributed. So when our students needed school issue, the masks that you could get from school, we were a logical place for that to happen. Quiet advocacy oftentimes is us raising the profile of our space and the role that we have in the school. We take on a lot of roles and responsibilities which don't have obvious ownership. And I think about the things that only I do. and they are not done by anybody else, including posting the lunch menu on the marquee every day. And, a lot of things that fall in under the category of technology and resetting passwords. There is one person in the building who does that. It is me. And it's a curse and a blessing. It is. But when I think about how often we take on responsibilities which do not make sense being given to a classroom teacher and do not make sense being given to an administrator, and I sort of fall into this place in between.
Yeah, that in between place it's awkward. It can make you feel alone. But I've enjoyed having some of those roles and responsibilities because it created the space for me to be the person to come to. And it also created the space for me to be able to share things that I do well. Being a librarian, heavy versed in technology, some of that back to school teacher training didn't necessarily pertain to me. We get stuck. I was part of the 4th, 5th, and 6th grade math PLC. Did that make sense for a meeting? No. Including some of that back to school stuff that didn't make sense. So I sat down with my principal and I said, all of the teachers have to have their computers set back up. They're boxed before we get out of school. I want to have them put it where they want it, just set it up or put a sticky note, and I will go look up computers. Instead of having to sit through this meeting that doesn't really pertain to me. I have to be here that day. It's part of my contract. So I would spend a couple of days doing nothing but setting up teacher computers. And then when the teachers got done with the meetings, they were ready to rock and roll. They didn't have to worry about trying to figure out how to get that stuff. And I also had the big, huge gray tub of cords for all of the things that went missing. So that was kind of a weird responsibility and a role, because if I had not done that, after they got out of meetings, guess who they would be coming to asking how to set up their computer, or I can't find a mouse. It saved time in the long run both ways, but it allowed me to show I was able to do that. And really helped the classroom teachers.
Well, and I think about how many times we are sort of, our physical space oftentimes is the repository for things that do not belong anywhere else. And if you are blessed to have a workroom, it becomes sort of this time capsule of all things that I know that teachers come to me and say, all right, this was in my room. I don't want it in my room, but I know we're not throwing it out, so I'm giving it to you. And you're like, great, awesome, fantastic.
Yay, thank
but
you.
when you mention the mice, I got to tell you, many of us have moved to the trackpad, but I've got a fair number of teachers and a considerable number of students who still like using a mouse. And when we decommissioned all of our computer labs, our dedicated computer labs, in lieu of, say, Chromebook carts, and going to a more modular, sort of putting things on carts and going one-to-one, all of those mice came to my space. And as somebody who's had both real and digital mice in my library, I don't mind them. They sit quietly. I'm talking about the wired mice that you plug in with a USB plug into your, laptop. And so I'd get all these random requests. Hey, Amy, I need some mice. No problem. Come get them. I'm giving them away. And they belong to the computer labs that no longer existed. I'm thinking about how often we have had to hold on to something only to then say, sure, no problem. I've got that here in the space. The adapter cords, so the USB-C to, HDMI cords, the HDMI cords that go missing so that you're providing those backups for people.
Oh, I have a better one, an overhead projector, because someone's smartboard went out and they still needed to teach. I had 13 of them when I first started in my last library, and my principal really, really wanted me to keep them, and I got them down to about 3 or 4. But we ended up, a teacher came down and said, hey, my board's out. I have no way to project anything. I didn't have an extra projector, but I said, you know what? I have an overhead projector, and according to our new art teacher who is fresh out of college, I have plastic printer paper, which is what she called overhead sheet. I didn't know what she was talking about. It was a whole thing.
Yeah, the transparencies. Yes.
Transparency sheet. She called them plastic printer paper.
That's cute. Bless her heart.
Yeah. Bless her
heart.
She was actually using them for an art project and doing like Sharpie stained glass windows. And so they could color on them. But I had those available. And that teacher was like, okay, I can, make some copies real quick. And we're going to roll with an old school, overhead projector.
Well, and you mentioned the laminating machine. Yes, I do have one of those, and I've become quite adept at making sure I can switch out the rolls. And by the way, if you use the last of that roll, you just run it through, roll it up, and give it to your art teachers. They can also, similar to like the transparencies and doing the stained glass, you use the spent. Use the last of the roll till it completely runs out, roll it back up and hand it off to our art teachers. And they'll use them for like goldfish bowls. They'll make little goldfish bowls. And
yes. Yeah. I actually saw someone who used them in the library. They cut them in bookmark sizes.
Yes,
and made
absolutely. We're following the same people on social media. I can't help but throw this out. We find answers and solutions to other people's problems. Who does that? Like, it's a very, I want to say, parental role. I mean, in some respects. And I say that only because our new hires, many of them are my children's age. I mean, this is their first job. Maybe it's their second job, but they are under 25. How about that? They're under 25. And everybody comes at this with varying degrees of just questions they don't feel safe asking, or things they don't want to say out loud. And I can just turn into work mom and really just help people go through some of the things that they're working through that may or may not have to do with work. And again, it's that bartender role where people just feel sort of safe. They can come and talk to you. We aren't in a department. We don't get mired in the politics of what's wreaking havoc in the special ed department? What's the drama in the ELA team? When I think about those kinds of dynamics, we're sort of shielded from them, and yet we have an opportunity to help everybody.
Yes. Yeah. I have a colleague, the amazing Ann Cowie. She was a school librarian. She now does practicum classes for another university. And we had this conversation about libraries being support. Many people don't like that. I'm not support staff. I am part of the faculty. But as a librarian, I want to do that. I want to support you. And I always, my phrase, and I use the GIF, and yes, I am a GIF person. I am a hard G. In a lot of presentations is the Jerry Maguire. Help me help you. Tell me what to do, and I will be happy to help you. But I don't know until you come to me. Like you said, we've got to have that conversation and be part of it and not just outsiders looking in.
I think unlike traditional classroom teachers, we have the kind of capacity to take on other people's problems because we work with everybody. And I tell people we're sort of like the Switzerland of the building. We are going to be able to help everybody. And in doing that, I think people realize that they can, it's not unusual for people to come and say, hey, can I just throw something out there and I just could use some feedback. And throw in the fact that, I'm twice their age. It means I have a little bit of perspective here. I want to say something that occurred to me, when I think about the role of a concierge, we are information concierges. We tend to connect what we know with the people who would benefit it the most. We also, when we have people in mind, and we always want to attach them to the resources that we have, and we tend to collect it in a way that we do so on behalf of others. I think about the last time I went to an ISTE conference, the last time I went to an ISTE affiliate conference. I'm looking not only for information that I can then teach at my next PD. I teach PD. I don't know how many other teachers feel that's an obligation, but for me, it's an assumed obligation. I will always, raise my hand and offer to teach PD. I feel like this is a very easy and obvious opportunity for me to do the things I can to support others, because since I became a librarian, their problems become mine. I'm going to go to a conference and look for solutions that I can share with others, because that's just part of my job.
Oh, yeah. I don't know how many times I've attended a conference session that it wasn't of interest to me, but I knew I could take it back to XYZ teacher, or this grade level teaches this topic. I'm going to go sit in so I know what that's all about and how I can better support that. And thinking of a concierge, they go, 90 to nothing all day long with so many different people. My schedule went from kindergarten to sixth grade. Sixth graders came in after kindergarten. That was a hard switch.
That's like a whiplash.
It was, but I think that's part of what you were saying is I taught kindergarten, first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth grade all in one day. Who else? What classroom teacher goes from kindergarten to sixth grade? The specialty teachers, PE, art, library. And I think that's what makes it great, and us to have so many solutions and being able to do that, because we're not in just one grade level. We're that whole span.
Well, and I remember being new in my building 3 years ago, very quickly learning people from all over the building. And that was very much in contrast to when I had been a social studies teacher. I would have known the people on my hall. I would have known somebody I might alphabetically be next in the mailbox. You're alphabetical and you're like, but other than that, I didn't have a reason to know who the math teachers were and a reason to know who the music teachers were. It didn't matter. I taught in the social studies department, sort of stay in your lane. There's something very overt about who we are and what we do, especially when it comes to our messaging. And I want to I think this is important, that how we introduce ourselves and the messaging that we put on our doors. I think about like the signage outside our space. What do we call ourselves? I think is really important. And I'm going to say right now, my job is information research technology specialist, but you better be sure when you walk in there, it says librarian.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I have very personal feelings about this because I hear and I see on social media questions being asked about renaming spaces. And I think that that's an advocacy piece too. Because if we get into renaming a library as a learning commons or whatever it happens to be, I think that, to me, that's putting us in the wrong direction. If you change the name of a library to something else, it's very easy for administrators to say, well, we don't have a library. We have a learning commons. Do we really need a librarian? So I really think that messaging is important. I had a library. In Arkansas, we are library media specialists. And sometimes that gets shortened. Sometimes it's just media specialist. Licensure says library media specialist. And I actually sent a contract back one year because in the line where it had my job title, it said teacher, classroom teacher. We do have specific laws that pertain to school librarians. And so I sent my contract back and I asked for it to be fixed. And they did change it. They were like, oh, I didn't realize, you're a teacher, you're on a teacher salary schedule, whatever. But they did fix it. But that was my sticking point. Yeah, I'm a teacher, but in this particular role, I'm a school librarian. So I had them change that.
I can speak about this because it is in the past tense. It was last year. But I had an administrator who regarded our learning commons as basically, they equated it with a student union. And so when I went and asked for money for books, I was turned down because it's not a library. It is a learning commons.
Learning commons to me sounds like a study hall.
And we are used as a study hall, but we become all things to all people. We are a transit lounge for our students who are coming in, who are at the community college, and they're coming in, or they're at their work study, and then they come in, and then they're between classes, so they need to be somewhere before the next class starts. We need to corral them. We do that every day. That's fine. I check in with those kids. There are non-librarians who feel if you name it something other than library, you are looking more progressive, more forward, more future thinking, in that this is now a space for everybody. And to call it a library means to limit it. But if you call it a learning commons, you call it an idea lab, or I don't know what you call it, but you're trying to make it more expansive. And it just, unfortunately, does a great injustice to us if we are then trying to turn around and get funded. And you're right. There, and by the way, my job is filled. It does not have to be filled by a librarian. It could be also filled by an ed tech specialist. A lot of things into jeopardy by removing that word and changing that terminology. And job title matters.
Yes, and I think that we also need to consider the people using our space. So there are a lot, they're students, right? They're younger, different generation. There was a study, AASL just published it out of Portland State University. And there was over 2,000 Gen Z and millennial students that were surveyed. Over half of them, like 54%, visited a physical library in the previous 12 months. So we're talking public library, right? Those are fresh out of high school students knowing that they can go to a library for whatever it is they need. I mean, I'm in Arkansas. We're pretty rural, right? A lot of our public libraries check out fishing equipment, car repair equipment, things like that. I know Tracy Chen in Vancouver, Washington, her high school library has a couch in it. Why? Because her students are more comfortable conversing and having conversations on a couch. Those types of things are, I think we need to consider, like you said, our physical space and how it serves our students. Going back to the library of days past, right? But we need to keep that title, and we need to make sure that it's instilled in our students, advocating for them, that a library is a space welcoming and open to everyone, so that when they leave school, they know in the real world, where can I go to get help?
Absolutely. And by the way, and also approve those millages to support their libraries when that funding is on the local ballot. So I'm very aware. I know I'm not alone when I say I have an entire drawer in my dresser of advocacy clothing. and hanging in my closets, I have all sorts of library advocacy, banned book T-shirts, and I have this jacket with this, all sorts of patches on them that I
oh my gosh, your jacket is goals. I need a jacket.
It is truly a passion project, and I wear it oftentimes as my armor. I wear it as my shield. Sometimes I feel absolutely it emboldens me and it invites conversations. I love the conversations when people ask me about something I'm wearing. And and I get stopped in the airport. You better believe I was flying somewhere and I wore my Free People Read Freely, and I had random people in security asking me about or thanking me like a public servant. Like they're like, oh my gosh, thank you. I love your shirt. That's so important. Are you a librarian? And it's like, yes, I am.
Yes. Yeah. I have pins on my backpack. I'm an elder millennial, so I don't carry a purse. I carry a backpack. But it has an I Love My Library pin on it that I picked up one year at a conference, and a Mr. Rogers pin. And being at the airport, people are like, oh, hey, and you'll start talking about it. I have several shirts from Reagan's t-shirt company in Iowa that, America Needs Libraries. I actually bought the Barbie one that was, I Am Books, or This Barbie Reads Fan Books. So to have loud and proud, and people do stop me and they'll ask questions. I am a firm believer of personalized artwork, meaning tattoos. I have the Deathly Hallows tattoo on my arm, and am an avid hiker. Was out in the middle of the woods one day and got stopped by two teenagers. Their parents had already gone by, and they stopped and said, "What's the Deathly Hallows? Have you read all?" We sat and chatted about Harry Potter books in the middle of, an Arkansas State Park, because I think that people make those connections and want to talk about what they're passionate about. So whether it's a Mr. Rogers pin or Free People Read Freely t-shirt, it's conversation starters that allow you to share not only what you love, but also your job and your work. And it can help combat some of that misinformation that's floating out there. I recently traveled to AASO and had that conversation about, oh man, have you seen what's happening? You're going to Florida for a school library conference? Yeah, I'm going to support my friends. So,
absolutely.
Yeah, we were all there, and it was great. Great time supporting those school librarians, and showing up and being there. You talked about attending rallies, but not protests. Things like that, I think, are ways to advocate quietly. Email signatures, posting. I had several librarians in Arkansas when we were going through this legislative session were not comfortable sending an email or calling a legislator. They didn't want their name tied to it. They were afraid. And I totally get that. But I created just a graphic on Canva that was like, this is the bill, email your legislator, say no, and kind of a little few reasons why, and sent that out. I saw it posted all across social media because they were okay sharing the, hey, here's this bill, kind of an information type thing, but not contacting personally. And even though, we would love people to contact their legislator, I get that it's scary, especially as a teacher. Part of our law that got updated, completely changed. That's a whole thing. It got rid of the Teacher Fair Dismissal Act. So a lot of our teachers are scared. They don't have to hear out their contract. They could be fired at any point in time. Arkansas is a right to work state, so we don't have unions. But I think even just sharing that on social media, or the AASL ALA report, post that. Anything that talks about the importance of school libraries is a great way to advocate quietly, but still share a piece of the story.
Ashley Cooksey, when it comes to being advocates and this quiet advocacy, which I embrace, I feel is part of who I am and what I do every day. I feel like you have shared so many different ways that we can engage and this kind of messaging and what we do every day to support our students and our school communities writ large. I'm so grateful that you're here today. I feel like there are so many things that we've offered up for our listeners to do. Let me ask you, as we are, you've got some time off, you're going to be, stepping back and enjoying the holidays and starting the new year. Moving forward, do you have anything that you're hopeful about for 2024?
Oh, gosh, so much that I am hopeful for. I'm actually serving on a national committee now, so I have committee work, of course, over the break, but seeing that through and working on that, growing my program at ATU for school librarians is up there on my list. And I really haven't really set goals for 2024. So this is, you guys are with me with my word vomit goal setting right now. I have not been as diligent in sharing on social media as I was in the past. I got to a point, and I think that we all do every now and then, of the negativity on social media, and it just got so much that I'm like, I need to take a break. I didn't delete or suspend any accounts. My Twitter is, or X, whatever. I can't get used to calling it X. It's still out there. I still, I've shared a little and done a few things there, and my website, ashleycooksey.com, but I really would like to do a little bit more, getting back into social media and back into sharing, and advocating for school libraries, because I taught adjunct for school library classes in a different role at another university. So now I feel like I'm kind of back in my homeland and back in my happy place. So I really want to kick off the year pretty strong in that area. Back into conferences. I've subscribed back to some newsletters. Just getting into the world of school libraries. And I think that that's a great advocacy piece too. Having that knowledge, like you said, being able to share tech tools when I find them, or how to connect classroom teachers to other classroom teachers. And, it used to be mystery Skype, but things like that, just coming back into that again. So that is part of my new year. And I was content editor for AASL Knowledge Quest. So that first January, February issue is all mine. So that's, I guess, kicking me back off into the world of school libraries, just solely focused on that.
Well, I love that. And I think that the message of positivity and sharing things, we excel at sharing resources. And for me, learning from librarians is my absolute favorite. So when I see things on social media where examples of school librarians who are sharing with other school librarians, and this is why our profession is so vibrant and strong, because, we're trying to make sure that everybody has what they need to succeed, even if we are really just supporting one another remotely. Ashley Cooksey, I am so grateful for the conversation today. I know there are people who would like to add you to their PLN. Please let us know where we can find you on social media. And I know that people will want to make sure they include you.
Absolutely. So my website is just ashleycooksey.com. It has my contact info and everything out there. On X, you can find me. It's Ashley Cooksey and the number 2. And I am on Instagram. It's more personal stuff, so you get to see pictures of my cats and hiking and flowers. I am a yoga teacher, so there's quite a few posts about yoga as well. But that is Ashley.Cooksey, the number 2, and then of course you can hunt me down on LinkedIn as well.
Fantastic. Listen, I hope you have a fantastic holiday, a happy new year. I know we're going to connect in 2024. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. This was an amazing conversation about so many different ways to advocate for your school library and yourself as a school librarian.
Thanks again, Ashley. Friends, if you found this episode helpful, please share it out with your team, your PLN, and on social media. For more episodes on all sorts of advocacy by school librarians across the United States and around the world, be sure to visit our playlist link in the show notes for the more than 20 previous episodes, all on the topic of advocacy. Be sure to follow on your favorite podcatcher so you'll never miss an episode. And if you really like listening today, consider sending some fan mail to Ashley. I know she would love to hear from you. One last friendly reminder, friends, use the code UNITED to take advantage of Capstone's generous $20 discount off an order of $100 or more, and librarians who book their very first Literati Book Fair for this school year and mention the code UNITED when booking may qualify to receive a $500 gift card to Titlewave. Visit the link in today's show notes and call the Literati team to see if you qualify. Friends, as I have done in the past, I will be taking off the next couple weeks to spend some time with my family and ring in the new year. Expect the first episode of 2024 to drop on Friday, January 5th. Remember, there are call-in episodes scheduled for January, Hills I'll Die On, and February, Purchases I Regret. And I encourage you to check out the link in today's show notes to learn all about how you can be featured in one or both of these episodes. Many thanks for tuning in to hear all of the amazing and inspiring school librarians who made 2023 so memorable. I wish for you and your families a wonderful holiday season and good health and happiness in the coming new year.